Hi guys, Drinking James here, and this video I didn't mention in my update video because this was more of an impromptu, thought-up video that I've kind of been thinking about the last couple weeks. In reality, it's a video that I've thought about making for quite some time, and recent events have kind of made me, alright, let's just do this. And I think the most natural, easy way is just to have an uncensored, conversational talk. And that's really about diversity in this community. And seeing that, today is Martin Luther King Day of all days, I think it's a great time to talk about it. And I'll really be speaking it on the perspective of race. So, to really set the stage on where this video idea has come from in recent times, as many of you guys know, Unlikely Fandom had recently been screened at a theater in New York just about a couple months ago. I was able to attend, and I enjoyed the film. There was a lot of great things about it. It was fun, and I'm sure a lot of other people did too. But a lot of people came away with the feeling that there was something missing, and felt that fandom was poorly represented. And a lot of that came from the ideas of, race and gender and even sexuality and all these other things. And recently, I don't even know the name of the guy because I just really don't care to pay attention to these types of people. But it's just some, right-wing, racist guy somehow got a hold of this trailer and started making comments like, oh, look at all these dumb white people here. And he had a comment about someone in the community who happens to be black and had said a few other things about it and mentioned like, oh, there's your token black guy in this thing. And, and it got a lot of people thinking. This fandom is represented largely in the film by a lot of straight white males, and that's just the truth and honest fact of it. And a lot of people are wondering, well, why wasn't there more diversity? Why isn't there more diversity in the community? Why don't we have more minorities? And it's a very fair question, and a difficult one to answer, in my opinion. So I think the real way to go about this is, I'm not going to do some factoid essay where I do a tons of research, because this isn't really a conversation that needs like that huge backing to it. This is just going to be me speaking on personal experiences and my honest opinions on these things, and really specifically from the race side of things. And for those of you who are new to this channel or just don't know me at all, I'm very obviously black, right? And, it's very well known that there's just not a ton of black users in this community. That's just the thing. There's a lot more in recent years. But I could speak a lot on that diversity standpoint, and I just want to make it clear that this video is not a criticism of Unlikely Fandom. It's not even like a review or anything like that. It's not even like a criticism of the community. I like to call it more of a personal observation, my honest thoughts. And I want to make sure that this video is not accusatory. I'm not mad at anyone or any particular person for anything that's happened. And I want to make that abundantly clear from the start. I think the easiest way to attack this is just kind of being honest about it and just sharing my thoughts openly. And I want this comment section to be a very, open field where people can feel comfortable asking questions and having tough conversations. Because that's kind of how these things can really get going. If we don't have these conversations about these things, then people are going to, continually have issues about it and whatnot. So I've decided that the best way to attack this is, let me be open about it, and I'll address my honest opinions about it, and keep it at that. So I've rambled for about 4 minutes now. Let's really get into the meat and potatoes of this thing. And the first question that I saw people asking is, why aren't there more minorities in the community? And I thought a lot about this, and I think I have an answer, right? I just want to say here and now, we as Thomas fans are spoiled in a way, because we have the internet at our disposal. And the internet, there's so many places to be able to find episodes for free. You can watch it on the actual YouTube channel. You can watch them on other channels. You can go to sites like, Amazon Prime and watch episodes, or on Netflix, or whatever it is on now. It's easy to get access to so many different types of people. When I was a kid, right, the only way to watch Thomas episodes is to be lucky enough to catch them on TV, or you had to buy DVDs and VHS tapes, right? speaking before YouTube was a thing, right? I'm talking like early 2000s. And I'm relatively, I would say within the average age of the community, I'm relatively on the younger side, maybe slightly below average. You think about people in the community who grew up in the 90s, right? I mean, if you think about television programming as Thomas was coming out, especially in the US, you had to have access to the shows, the channels to be able to watch. And for those of you who, maybe didn't grow up in that era, I mean, I grew up at the very end of it, that the TV still used, I remember we had a TV that still had antenna. I remember the day that we got cable and they disconnected like local access channels and stuff like that. And that was around the time it was like 4 or 5 right there. So, you didn't have, if you didn't get access to like local channels that had like PBS Kids or whatnot on it, if you didn't get Disney or Cartoon Network or just SpongeBob, like they weren't just on your TV. You had to get cable and you had to be able to pay for that. And that was something that not a lot of low income people could afford. And let's be honest, a lot of the lower end people who tend to have lower incomes, especially in this country, tend to be minorities, right? Not going to really make any strong statements about that. That's just kind of true based on statistics, right? So naturally, for people to get into Thomas and have it stick, it has to be continually introduced to you. For me, right, when I first got into it, first I got the VHS tapes. I would watch the show on TV, both on PBS and then on Sprout and whatever other channels would air on. I would, buy the DVDs. I would start watching that. Eventually, when it came on YouTube, I would watch episodes on YouTube, and it just stayed with me. It stuck with me. You notice a lot of people, right? There's a period of time where they get out of Thomas, and it's really stronger. It's a lot stronger in older fans, because the distribution for Thomas, especially in the 90s, was a lot smaller because the seasons were more spread out. So you really had to catch the episodes on TV. It was hard to really drill that into people. And especially now if you come from a poor background, there was really no way to be able to... there was no way to really be able to consistently watch the show in a way that it stuck. I mean, I'm the only person in my family that really, really paid attention to Thomas as a kid. Maybe one other cousin had a decent amount of stuff that showed that they had interest, but I doubt they do anymore. And it's not a cheap hobby to get into. It's not a cheap franchise to get into, because there's a lot of stuff you want to get, and it's a lot of things, and it's not something that really favors the poor. But the thing that happens nowadays is now it's more widely distributed, so it's a lot easier for people to gain access and continue to have interest in it. So I do think that's why there's been an uptick in people of different backgrounds in the fandom. But I think another part of it really comes down to how more open the community has become. Because when I first joined the community, right, meeting up with people, hanging out at train shows, that was just not really a thing. And this was 10 years ago, literally 10 years ago. And it's so weird to me that now it's just normalized that people have gone to each other's houses, and people have gone to weddings of other people, and they've gone to graduations. It's now it's the community is much as a part of your personal life as it is a part of your internet life. And we all know what we all look like. Everyone posts their face, everyone takes pictures. It's very commonly known. I mean, there was a period of time that people didn't even show their actual names on the internet. People didn't share addresses, people didn't share names, faces, anything. So a lot of us were identified by channels. And I think that's a very interesting aspect here, because our identities within the YouTube community was not about your race or your gender or even your sexuality, right? I'm not going to go too deep in the gender and sexuality aspect, because I am a straight male, and, it doesn't feel right for me to comment about the struggles of other people that, I can't really begin to put my feet in, but I can talk about race. I just want to make that point clear if I hadn't before. But it wasn't so much if you were just watching a lot of Thomas projects, like Trains videos or even a Bachman video, pretty much anything where you couldn't see the person use their hands, you didn't really know what they looked like. I mean, I've had people tell me that if they didn't see my hands, they would have thought I was white, because I don't necessarily sound black, which isn't really a thing. One doesn't sound black. You can have an urban accent, which a lot of people attribute to that, of someone of color, but that doesn't necessarily mean I sound black. That's besides the point. The thing about it is, and I think this is something, sorry, my voice is getting a little dry. I think this is something that a lot of our identity in the community is not based really on our skin color. It wasn't based, I should say, on skin color and all that stuff. It was more based on just your channel and what you did. You were a Trains user, you were a Wooden Railway user, you were a Bachman user, you used Tomy, you used Take Along, you did sprites, you did, stories, you did something, you made customs. And as the community has grown, both in exposure and size, and so many more different voices have come in that we've seen many more people of different backgrounds come in. And racial identity is something that you do think about. I mean, and I'll be honest, right? I remember my first meetup. I really had 2 meetups that same weekend. But my first meetups with people, I'll be honest. I was one of the few people of color there. I was the only person that was black on those trips. But, it wasn't, it never really was something I thought that deeply about, right? Because a lot of those guys are my friends, and it didn't really matter to me that I was white, but it was something that kind of stuck out to me a little bit more as we met up, because it is something you don't think about when you're online, because when you're talking on Skype or on Twitter, you're just profile pictures. You don't really think about that person's face until you see it. I had no problem with this, of course, and everyone there was courteous with me, and everyone was great. Like, I had no issues. There was no judgment, no prejudice, no nothing. But it is something that I think escapes a lot of people's minds, and this is where some people bring up the idea of privilege, that some people don't think about this stuff because they don't have to. And in a weird sort of way, and I want to make this as clear as possible, I've honestly kind of felt myself as someone who was privileged in a different way. I grew up in a town where it was fairly diverse, right? I grew up around a lot of people that looked different. In fact, my main friend group, a lot of the people in it were actually of Asian descent, right? I didn't actually have a ton of black friends in school, despite, you tend to see black kids hang out with black kids and white kids hang out with black. No, our school was very different. It was very much everyone just kind of hung out with whoever they wanted. My group was very diverse, right? And there were times where I would do things like a summer camp that was out of town where, okay, it was noticeably more white, but you do feel the differences there and how sometimes people talked. And you realize that a lot of people don't grow up in areas where they are around people of different backgrounds, of different genders and sexualities and races and religions. They're just kind of used to everyone being the same. So when they're in positions where everyone's not the same, they maybe don't acknowledge it in the ways they should. And, that was a huge criticism of Unlikely Fandom. And, yeah, it is kind of, does have a lot of people featured in it. I would say race-wise, I think it's okay, because there were a few people of, different racial backgrounds in it. I'm actually in it myself. But I wouldn't say necessarily that women were well represented, or even those who were LGBTQ were well represented in other things. And I think the problem that I have with a lot of times with diversity is the idea of mixing two kinds of concepts, and the idea of adding seats to the table versus taking away seats to the table. And a lot of people felt that, especially with Unlikely Fandom, that there was just a lot of straight white guys in it that, it doesn't really represent the fandom. And if you have a racist guy pointing out you got a lot of white guys in your movie, probably not a good thing. And I just think I go back to my point about the fandom identity to now. It's like the fandom's identity hasn't really been as much about who you look like. It's been about you're into Thomas, and what kind of Thomas fan are you? And we've only, in recent years, and I really emphasize recent years, have transitioned into really influencing, people's sexualities and gender and races, right? I'll give an example. Many people know I like to go to the big Edison meetups, usually the ones in November where a lot of people show up. And I remember the first time I went, I met a guy. I'm really, really bad at names, and I hope I don't offend you for not remembering, but I met someone who was, of similar color to me, someone else who was black, and it was pretty cool, and we had a conversation. It was a conversation I could have had with anyone, but it was nice to have a conversation with someone who looked like me. And in recent years that I've gone, I see more and more and more people that do look like me. But not just like me, like different walks of life, and they become more and more diverse. And I think that process has happened over the last 4 years as people become more comfortable on the internet. Something that we were told not to do, in years past. Again, fandom meetups have only really been a thing the last 10 years or so. And in recent years, they've really gone up. I mean, people now you have people who live in the same towns as each other, people who visit each other, people who go to special events together. I mean, it is something just, incredible, right? And as someone who grew up in a very diverse background, I don't think that deeply about how other people look, mainly because I'm used to everyone being different, and that's normal to me. And that's kind of what I feel like diversity should be. It shouldn't be something like, hey, here's a black guy, give extra attention to the black guy. Here's a gay man, give extra attention to the gay man. Not that they don't deserve attention, but I don't want to take away from what's already there. I want to strengthen and improve by adding to it, by mixing the pot more, right? None of the guys in Unlikely Fandom, said anything or did anything that made me truly believe that they didn't deserve to be in the film, right? Regardless of their background. And, for some of them to get cut because, and I'm not speculating that this is going to happen. I'm just saying, like, if this was the decision to remove some of them, if this was the decision, it's not really fair to some of them that they get removed for the sake of, you're white and we need black opinion. So, bye-bye. Because the white person probably had something good to say. I mean, there was really no one in the film that I didn't believe didn't belong, right? And I, speaking purely on the racial side of things. So, it's a really difficult situation with diversity. And I think another example is to use the show. As we all know what happened after season 21 and the things the show was trying to do in Big World, Big Adventures. The thing that bothered me about Big World, Big Adventures, and it kind of exemplifies my issue. The show was like, there's too many males in the cast, we need more diversity, we're going to get rid of males and add females. You got rid of the males and added females, and the females barely did anything for the rest of the series. Nia, Rebecca, they didn't do much. The show was still heavily dominated by Thomas, a male character, and pretty much all of the other female characters you introduced were just kind of like one-note traded characters that didn't really do much. So it wasn't like, we're going to have more women, and at the same time, you've kind of abandoned a lot of the already established female characters. Characters like Emily, Marion, Caitlin, Belle, Rosie, they didn't get bigger roles. They weren't used more prominently. They weren't normalized into roles. They were just kind of pushed to the side so you can add 2 more females to the cast, get rid of 2 fan favorite characters for the sake of keeping up appearances. And that's not what diversity is. And to me, that gives me an icky feeling, right? When people say like, oh, I want you because you're a black guy, you're going to add something to me, to my thing. And it's like, well, I don't want to be added just because I'm black. I have value beyond my skin color. It's kind of like an ironic, reverse racist kind of mindset where it's like, now I'm being put on a pedestal because of me being a minority instead of being pushed off of one because I'm being a minority. It's like the same thing to me. It's like on the same spectrum. The thing is, it should just be normalized that people look different, and that's the end of it, right? That's just how I've always felt about diversity, because it always gives me an icky feeling whenever somebody tries to propone it. Like, there was times where, I'll give an example. There was a time I was in 12th grade English class, and, I was the only male that happened to be in that class. So whenever we were talking about a book, they would always ask me about the male perspective. And I always felt awkward about it, because, granted, it was one of the few situations in my life that a male is actually a minority, but it was an awkward situation because, my opinions of the girls in my class didn't differ much at all. So I didn't really it felt weird that like, oh, my voice suddenly matters more because I'm a man. So my voice is going to matter because I'm the only man in this group of women and the teacher's a woman. So it's like, it gave me this weird feeling all the time it happened. It just made me feel awkward because I didn't want to be put on a pedestal for being different, right? It's kind of the opposite feeling. So in my rambling incoherence here, what I'm really trying to say is that diversity is a very difficult thing to get right. On one hand, you don't want to blatantly act like it never is a thing, because you do that and you know, people could exercise privileges and whatnot. It leads to situations where people of different backgrounds don't get their voices heard, or they don't receive opportunities, and they end up in a situation. However, you don't want to push it too much to the fact that you're pushing minorities on such a pedestal that now they are actually, now you're putting them in positions where you're kind of trivializing them based on their socioeconomic factors. And that doesn't sit well with me at all. What I believe in is I just want to exist in a world where all of us, regardless of race, background, anything, can just exist, and it's normal. I don't want to have to think about the fact that, well, I'm black and everyone else in this group is white, so, you know, they better appreciate me, you know, and I don't want to do that. It's too distracting. Whenever I hang out with my friends in the summer, and again, a majority of them are white, you know, I don't ever think about the fact that they're just white, right? I mean, they can't help what skin color they're born into, and I can't help it either. And they can't help the fact that they're Thomas fans, and neither can I. I mean, they have just as much a right to be in this fandom as I do. No one's really in those groups pushed higher or pushed lower or anything like that. I mean, the fact of the matter is there are fewer minorities in the fandom, and they do deserve to have their voices heard. You know, people should try to prop each other up, you know, and, you know, they should be allowed to bring a chair to the table, but not at the expense of removing whether it exists. I mean, the fact of the matter is a lot of the earliest fandom creators and a lot of the longest tenured people in the fandom happen to be white, for reasons that, you know, unfortunately don't benefit minorities, but I'm not going to take away that. You know, Enterprising is someone who is very prominently shown in Unlikely Fandom. He's essentially the film's main character. And he is, as far as I'm aware, I don't want to assume too much on things, but he is a white guy, and a straight white guy. And, you know, would I change him for someone else? I mean, it's hard to find someone with the unique experiences that he's had, because he's been so involved in so many areas of the fandom. And he's a friend to so many different people that, in a weird way, he is kind of the epitome of diversity. The fact that he'll look to anyone, someone with a lot of subscribers or very few subscribers, with a kind heart, and is always willing to spend a minute to talk even if he doesn't want to. You know, I've never heard him judge anyone for any reason, no matter how legit of a reason he could have to judge them. He just exists and does things. In a lot of ways, I kind of support him being a lead for that reason, because in a lot of ways he represents this fandom's identity of old and new. The idea of someone who's this long tenured guy that's been around and met a lot of people and seen a lot of things, but is also equally as accepting of those people on a lot of different things. You know, I wish Cardy a lot of luck in finalizing and making changes to his film, because I do think he will be making changes, just based on recent feedback, and we'll see what happens. I don't want to speculate too much on it or speak for him, but I also believe and trust that he will make the right decisions. You know, as a minority myself, I didn't feel heavily offended by the film's outlook. Again, there are things the film could do to definitely better show the diversity, but I also don't want Cardy to take away from what already existed. At least from the racial perspective. If someone wants to make a similar video speaking about gender roles or even sexuality, that's fine, right? I just don't feel comfortable speaking too highly on that. So I really stuck to race here. And I just wanted to speak to my honest thoughts about race in the fandom. And I'll be honest, you know, for the most part, I have felt pretty comfortable in the fandom. I can't really think of many times where I have been uncomfortable because of my race here. I felt uncomfortable for many other reasons, not because of socioeconomic factors, because people in this fandom can be assholes sometimes. But for the most part, you know, I'm welcomed at meetups. People always greet me with a smile. I've never had someone look at me funny because I'm a different race or whatnot. And anytime anything of the kind has happened where race has come up, a lot of my whitest friends will come forward and immediately back me up without question or fail. And I think for that reason, you know, the fandom is trending in a very good direction. People really understand, you know, listen, we're different, but we're all Thomas fans, right? Remove skin color, remove sexuality, remove gender, and we all still love the show. So why can't we all just love the show together? And I think that's the most important thing. And it kind of, in a weird way, falls in line with this day of Martin Luther King Day. The idea of, you know, Martin Luther King's dream about people standing hand in hand, brothers and sisters, you know. And I think that's kind of what the fandom needs. So these are just my thoughts. There's points in this where I'm probably incoherent or rambling, and if you want any points clarified, please go in the comment section and highlight those points. I will try to explain my point as effectively as possible. I didn't want to edit this too much. I didn't want to go too far and too deep into this, because I feel like the more I could do it, it would sound less authentic. So if I spoke truthfully from my heart, and I spoke honestly from my heart, I think a lot of people could have this conversation. And I'm sure there's things that people are going to disagree with that I said. And I want to have those uncomfortable conversations, because if I am wrong about something, I'd like to be educated. And I'm sure the same way that if you guys have been wrong about something, you'd like to be educated. That's what this video is supposed to do. It's start a positive dialogue, not an accusatory one, not one that's like, you know, we got to get rid of this, white people are bad, or, you know, straight guys got to go. No, this is me having an honest conversation and thoughts. And we're going to keep it positive, and we're going to keep it honest. So, with that, guys, happy Martin Luther King Day. This is Train King James, signing off.